So, Preston, we have more stuff coming out of the Cushing Library. For those of you who don't recall,
it never ends.
it never ends. And by the way, shout out to G Stuff. He was telling me more about what was going on. According to him, he only went through the A Feast for Crows draft, and he didn't go through like the other stuff. And apparently, there's more drafts over there in regards to the other novels. So now, of course, G Stuff, looked at the Feast for Crows. This person here, I want to get their name here, so let me pull them up real quick. rehearsedtoast on Reddit. He was looking over the A Game of Thrones drafts, and you read it, and you found some interesting stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I've read his post here. So he was looking over a manuscript of A Game of Thrones from 1993, November 1993, and a second manuscript of A Game of Thrones from November 1994. Now, Game of Thrones was published in 96, so, and it's going to be finished, probably, or I think early in that year. I want to get the exact date on when was Game of Thrones published, the exact month. It was published August 1st, 96, which means he's going to be finished with the draft in early of that year. And we kind of know, obviously books change over time, but how much they change is kind of interesting. Like the original stories and what gets cut and what gets changed. I think we've all read, we've talked about the original outline of A Game of Thrones and things like that and how different it is. But
how the outline had Robb and Joffrey fighting each other on the battlefield, and Tyrion was in love with Arya. Yeah,
and Sansa was not a character, and Tyrion was not a little person, and all sorts of differences. And so it's kind of interesting. So we go back in time, time traveling Bran. We go back in time to November 93. America's, it's a different time. People like Guns N' Roses. It's and George R.R. Martin is finishing his 1993 manuscript of A Game of Thrones, and there's some small differences from what's published in 96. And so one of the things that was kind of interesting is there was a plague introduced already happening in A Game of Thrones from the beginning. In fact, the plague kills Jon Arryn, not poison, and Ned is fearful of catching the plague if he heads south. In this, now keep in mind, maybe I should backtrack a little. This November 93 draft only has the first 13 chapters of A Game of Thrones because just George hasn't finished the rest. So these, but for the most part, these 13 chapters are very similar to the published material, except for these few changes. So one is that there's this plague, which is interesting because obviously we know about the grayscale epidemic that's going to happen. That's been, foreshadowed with John Connington arriving with grayscale to Westeros. And people also point to a Clash of Kings at the House of the Undying, that there's this stone beast that breathes fire that Dany sees, and people kind of assume that this is the grayscale epidemic. But so even before a Clash of Kings, way back in the beginning, way back when he first wrote these chapters, he was envisioning an epidemic of some sort that was going to be killing people. That was a main thing from the beginning, but he decided to remove the plague and bring in grayscale later as a concept. Grayscale is introduced in A Clash of Kings. There's no mention of grayscale prior to A Clash of Kings. But it's of course introduced right there in the prologue with Shireen, and then it's I think it's mentioned as well with Theon in that same book. It's sort of these little funny thing like words are wind, like it doesn't appear until a certain book and then it's mentioned all over the place, or somebody saying nuncle, like it makes no sense that it wouldn't be earlier. No, it's mentioned in Grayscale is just mentioned in just in context of Shireen, but nonetheless, like it's introduced as a concept in that book, and then I think Grayscale is barely mentioned in later books, but I mean in Storm of Swords, but then kind of like reappears. I guess Grayscale is mentioned once in A Storm of Swords with regards to Shireen, and then it's mentioned quite a bit once you get to A Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. And so so I don't know. He always had this idea that there was going to be a plague from the very beginning. So I guess it's going to be a very important part of the plot.
Actually, I wanted to ask you about the idea that Jon Con would be spreading the Grayscale plague across Westeros. Is this one of your theories, or has this been in the community for quite some time?
I think most people accept that Jon Con is going to be spreading Grayscale across Westeros. I mean, or else they just don't think about it. I mean, they various characters bring up Grayscale and talk about and fear it. Like people at the Wall are fearing Shireen. Pycelle brings up the story of the Grayscale breaking out in Old Town and stuff like this. The Grayscale's brought up by the Ironborn. It feels like a Chekhov's gun, this deadly disease that could go around and kill so many people. And I think with the House of the Undying vision at the same time, it just people just kind of have this idea that there's going to be this epidemic happening. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people just I've never met a fan who didn't think that there was going to be Grayscale wasn't going to play a major role. Like a breakout wasn't going to play a major role. I actually was very surprised when Game of Thrones, the show, had Grayscale essentially just be Jorah catching it and then immediately getting cured. Like there's no breakout, right? That really shocked me. That it was never part of the story.
Wait. How is it cured again in the show? Because I blocked it out of my mind. Doesn't Sam
reads a book. He reads a book about a method, and the other maester Ebros says that it's too risky, and Sam just does it anyway.
Well, what does he do? Does he melt down obsidian and then just rub it on Jorah's wounds, or he just
cuts it off. I don't think it goes into does it get into the obsidian? I think he just goes in with a knife and has a method of some books about.
I remember him cut it. I fucking forgot. I blocked this out of my mind.
Yeah.
It's so dumb. He scrapes it off, and then Jorah has these gaping wounds. I think he goes and rubs in some obsidian on it. I'll have to look it up again.
Was it really that?
It was ridiculous.
Was it really obsidian?
I think it. I remember it being dragonglass. What else could it be?
Really? I don't.
Hold on. I need to look this up now because this is gonna bother me.
Apparently, I'm fine. Apparently, it's Sam is researching a bunch of books, and somebody, some Redditor with eagle eyes, found a page, blew it up. And there's a page that says ingesting dragonglass might be a possible treatment for disease, which includes grayscale.
There it is.
So, yeah, I was about to say, I don't remember anything in the show about grayscale, curing anything. No. But okay, all right. Grayscale cures... obsidian cures grayscale. That's really weird. Okay, but nonetheless, from the beginning,
right.
George wanted a big breakout. It's just that he started with Jon Arryn actually not dying of poison but of that, and then decided to cut it and then bring it back, or have it come in a different form, which is I guess something that he's done a couple, like, I mean, he's done it with the I'm talking about like aborting a plot that he wants to bring in, but aborting it the first time and then doing it in a different manner. Like the religious zealots of A Clash of Kings disappear, but then which were clearly put there because he thought he was going to have a plot with religious zealots, but then he like aborted that one and then brought in the Sparrow movement later. So, you know, this is the kind of thing where he has an idea about something and then aborts it and then does it again in a different way.
So yeah, so that's why the remove plague plotline is important, because we might be getting that with Jon Con in Westeros. That's interesting. I would like to see that. I'm sure someone will probably take another trip to the Cushing Library and look at the Clash of Kings drafts, and I'm sure the religious zealots will pop up at that point.
What else is in there? So apparently in these early drafts, there's no Howland Reed, and Jon Arryn is the one that goes to the Tower of Joy with Ned. And that was, you know, this was changed, and Howland Reed was created in order to fill that void. And I imagine that's just because if you're going to kill Jon Arryn at the very beginning of the book, like Jon Arryn's going to, you know, all the knowledge that Jon Arryn has dies with him, and so you want to create a different character in case you want to bring back that Tower of Joy situation.
I love how Howland has this like weird popularity behind him, because he's literally one of the most important unseen characters in the entire series that isn't dead, who holds the answer to so many things, yet George is just holding him back for some reason. Because Howland, there's so many theories around him being the guy at Winterfell that Theon sees, or being the High Sparrow, or...
If you actually analyze Howland Reed as a character logically, he doesn't make any sense. He's an absolute asshole, right? This is supposedly like Ned's best friend, and he sends fuck all soldiers to Robb's war. Like, his best friend. Like, you know, like their enemies in the north sent more forces. Lady Dustin sent more forces, and she hated Ned. You know, Howland Reed, his best friend, sends nobody. You know, he sends 2 people with Bran. You know, and that's it. Nobody, none of the Cranach men fight in the war. And so it's just, but of course, like, you know, if you bring Howland Reed out, then all of a sudden all of the secrets he has are brought out. So George couldn't bring him out. You know, I don't actually think that, like, you know, he was thinking about like Howland Reed being a complete dickhead, a treasonous dickhead.
Treasonous!
You call your, yeah, the banners were called, man. The banners were called. This is feudalism, okay? The banners were called. He's supposed to supply men, and he doesn't. You know, so